I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GBNews.
Hello, I'm Simon Pusey. This is your news at 3 o'clock. Taxpayers could be liable for up to £335 million after a government-backed bank failed to properly scrutinise collapsed lender Greensill Capital. An MP's report found British business back checks on the company were woefully inadequate. Dutch police have confirmed protesters were injured when warning shots were fired during riots in Rotterdam. Water cannon was also used to disperse crowds of people demonstrating against tighter coronavirus restrictions. Meanwhile, thousands of people are demonstrating against COVID-19 policies in the Austrian capital of Vienna. The country heads into a full lockdown on Monday. And the UK government is a step closer to extending a ban on single-use plastic items such as plates, cutlery and polystyrene cups. I'll be back with your latest news in around half an hour.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather across the UK, turning colder as a weak weather front moves south across the country. Let's take a look at the details. The southwest of England will tend to remain cloudy this evening, with a few spots of rain moving in from the north. Mild initially, but turning much colder later on. Southeast England and the London area will also be on the cloudy side. Initially dry, but outbreaks of rain will arrive from the north. The rainy conditions will be across Wales this evening, a few heavy bursts developing as it sinks southwards. Temperatures around 10 degrees Celsius, though, this evening. It will also be cloudy and damp across the Midlands, with splashes of rain moving southwards. Temperatures around 9 or 10 degrees Celsius, but falling later as clearer air moves in from the north. Clear skies for northern England this evening once the rain has cleared, with a brisk northerly wind developing. Most places will become dry, but feeling much colder as temperatures continue to fall. Heavy showers across much of Scotland, these falling as snow over the tops of the mountains. A strong and gusty northerly wind too. The clearest...
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello and welcome to We Need to Talk About, your weekend fix, where I pose a question that needs plenty of time for discussion. Today, we need to talk about online safety. Move fast and break things. That was apparently Mark Zuckerberg's infamous motto when it came to the blistering pace of development in Silicon Valley. Those daring dot-com bros revolutionized the world by becoming the choreographers of our communication. Who we connect with, how we connect with them, and what we are connecting over. It all seemed like a blur of opportunity, an alternative Randian tech utopia where the limitations of human interaction could finally break physical, temporal, and linguistic boundaries, where the frontiers of freedom are being pushed to their limits, aided by artificial intelligence and algorithms to feed needs we didn't even know existed, generating new biopsychological pathways stimulated by compulsive engagement in rewarding on-screen stimuli, pushing our attachment to the platforms themselves deeper and deeper. Yet something else has taken place. By forging such addictive bonds to technology, are we conversely dehumanizing ourselves? Instead of a world of connections, are we doing the opposite and disconnecting from reality, from the truth, from each other? Have we moved so fast that we have severed some of the most abstract but essential bonds of humanity? Leaked internal documents from Facebook have revealed the extent to which the company is aware that its technology has potent and grave, insidious real-world implications, encouraging self-harm and suicide, favouring extreme, polarising content, distorting democratic determination through imbalanced promotion of unverified clickbait, spreading fake news, exploited for grooming and abuse, to harness and seed extremism, and availing itself to serious manipulation by criminals and hostile foreign actors, simultaneously building a parallel dark web where sinister and nefarious activities bubble just below the surface. Ushering in a whole new, untested meta-existence in uncharted virtual territory is leading to perverse reverberations in the realm of the real, such as an explosion in cosmetic procedures to look more like filtered avatars, dubbed selfie dysphoria. Yet because there has never been any form of metric to monitor the crossover effects of our online behaviour onto our daily lives, the full extent of the impact of social media consumption is hard to measure and perhaps woefully, dangerously underestimated. What is still a relatively new innovation, having existed a mere 17 years, has been allowed to develop, entirely unbridled and loosely monitored. We're only just beginning to realise the potential and significant harms in retrospect, while being forced to ask whether we can now put the genie back in the bottle. But it's not only the psychological impact we should be scared of. The sheer scale of potential monetization and manipulation of social media means that this extremely powerful resource can insert itself directly into your psyche and work surreptitiously to control your actions and attitudes. It can be used to harvest demographic information on an industrial scale, with platforms such as TikTok accused of being used by the Chinese Communist Party for mass surveillance and cyber intelligence. Facebook used to go by the slogan, "It's free and always will be." But if we aren't paying to use it, how has it amassed a $130 billion market value? Because you, dear viewer, are the thing on sale. You are the invaluable commodity, the most powerful resource on earth, a unit to buy things, to vote for things, to believe in things, and campaign for things. You are the vessel of commerce, with every click, every post, interaction, and piece of open source data up for grabs to shadowy figures who want to select you to commodify for future profits and inscrutable influence, regardless of the harm it may be doing to you, your community, your privacy, your security, and your sanity. With the UK Parliament currently taking evidence ahead of the formulation of the online safety bill, we could be one of the first countries in the West to broadly regulate social media, with only Germany and Australia attaching legal addendums on the most extreme harmful content online. But is clamping down on communications platforms akin to mass censorship and regulatory overreach and a threat to individual liberty? Or is it perilously long overdue? Today, we really need to talk about online safety. Let's talk first to cybersecurity expert and former senior military intelligence officer, Philip Ingram, MBE. Philip, fantastic to have you on. Now, what's interesting is we do often talk about the social media platforms as if they've already existed, as if they're a human right. They're free to download, they're by and large free to use unless you are a company. But are they really all about freedom?
Well, you summed it up very well in your introduction. They're not about freedom, they're about making money. And the Facebook revelations have shown that. And they make money by exploiting the people that they've got on there for free. You rightly highlighted that those people are the commodities. And therefore, Facebook manipulates the commodities to make sure that it is appealing to advertisers and others who want to pay for its services so that it can get the outputs from them to continue to grow that advertising revenue. It's very, very dangerous indeed.
And how can social media platforms be exploited by nefarious characters, by criminals, by hostile actors? I mean, we think we're just having a chit-chat with people we knew at university, but there is a sort of sinister underbelly to all of this that coexists and is constantly being built.
Well, it is, and it's very subtle. We all remember adverts from our childhoods, and I'll not compare your childhood to mine because mine was many years before yours. But you can remember those adverts, and they stimulate a thought in your mind, and they stimulate you understanding the product. Because what that's doing is it's stimulating what's called the feel-good quartet of different chemicals in your brain: dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphins. And they make you feel, you get this nice, warm, tingly feeling down your back whenever you hear a comforting advert. The same thing happens whenever your personal beliefs and your arguments are being reinforced by what you're seeing in social media, by adverts that pop up that just happen to be related to products that you're interested in, or your best friend's interested in, and you haven't had a chance to look at it yet. All of that doesn't happen by accident. It's being designed, and you came up with some of the phraseology that there is behind it, but the wider psychodemographic profiling that these platforms can do to really understand what someone's psyche is, can then very subtly be used to change people's beliefs, to change people's thinkings, and get them to do things that maybe, if they were rational and not being influenced, they wouldn't do.
I mean, up to date, because this is a virtual world, it's largely gone completely unregulated, almost as if it doesn't have to coexist with the same sort of law and order and social standards as the real world. I mean, that's very apparent when you see the behaviour of online trolls. But how imperative do you think it is to actually now try and harness and at least sort of control this cyber metaverse that's being created?
Well, the trouble is technology is moving so fast and legislation never keeps up with it. The current piece of legislation that covers all activity online is the 1990 Computer Misuse Act. Well, in 1990, Twitter and Facebook and TikTok and most of the things that we hear about today didn't exist. So this online harms bill is essential at trying to do that. But I think there's a wider piece here for society to try and understand. People will do things online that they wouldn't think twice about doing or even considering in the real world. And they don't realize that everything that's done online, anyone can access it. It doesn't matter how closed down you've got your profiles. There are people around the world who know how to access it and to get at it. And it's immutable. It never goes away. You can always find it. And therefore, I suggest to people that they apply the rule that if you're not going to do it in the front entrance to the local supermarket, if you're not going to say it to people that are coming through, if you're not going to behave in that way, if you're not going to have yourself dressed in the way that you're going to do it online, why do it online?
And when we think about things like Facebook, about Twitter, until it comes to election time, and then we seem to get extremely polarised, well, we're polarised all the time, not much thought is really given to what's going on. But how easily could social media platforms be harnessed or exploited as weapons of war?
Well, they are already, because we keep hearing Chief of the Defence Staff and the Secretary of State for Defence talking about the grey zone. And this is nothing new. This goes back to the 6th century Chinese philosopher and general Sun Tzu, who said, all warfare is deception, all deception is warfare. And if you can win a battle without having to fight, then that's the way that you should be prosecuting warfare. And that's what's happening in the modern information age, because things can be fed at you. And people are very quick at developing what I call self-misinforming groupthink. So you don't like the argument that's coming through on your Twitter feed or your other feed. So what you do is you mute or you block those that are against the messaging, the ideas that you've got, because you think, I disagree with them. They're just being trolls. They're being angry. But then all of a sudden your timeline's filled with people that are reinforcing your beliefs the whole way through. And you think, oh, well, then I have to be right. Everyone on my timeline is believing the same thing that I do. But they're only doing that because you're only keeping people in your timeline who think the same way as you. And that's easy to manipulate. Governments are manipulating it, large corporations are manipulating it, and they're getting it to try and get you to do something, whether it be vote in a certain way, whether it be buy a certain product, or invest in another way. You are being manipulated.
Thank you so much, Philip, for coming on. Sinister stuff and fascinating to talk to you. Thank you so much. Philip Ingram, MBE there. Well, I'm joined now by Dr. Daria Kuss, Associate Professor in Psychology at Nottingham Trent University and a cyber psychology expert. Thank you so much for coming on. I mean, we've just heard Philip Ingram there talking about how social media could indeed be harnessed to manipulate populations, or at least portions of demographics, to behave in certain ways. But how powerful is the influence of our virtual world on our real world when it comes to our psychology?
Thanks a lot, Alex, for having me today. Now, I think you're posing a really important question, thinking about the virtual world and its impact on our reality. Now, the virtual reality is present in our everyday lives. I think there is very little differentiation anymore between what happens online and what happens offline. We are on social media on a regular basis. We're using technology in order to communicate, in order to engage with others, in order to do our shopping, to be entertained. We're using social media for any kinds of purposes. Technology use really has become the status quo. And I think we really need to understand it. It has become so deeply intertwined with our lives that we cannot imagine our lives without technology. And as a consequence, what we will see and what we are already seeing are a number of psychological impacts of technology use on our mental health and well-being. Some of them are very positive, but others, as the recent Facebook papers have shown, can be very, very negative in very many ways, detrimental to our psychological well-being, can have an impact on our levels of potential depression, anxiety, stress, addiction, which we've studied quite a lot here at Nottingham Trent University. And when we're thinking about young users, especially, who are still in the process of development, where they're developing their brains, where they're developing their control mechanisms in their brains, they may be particularly vulnerable to the possible negative impact of excessive technology use. That's social media use, that's gaming, and a variety of other uses. And we really need to bear in mind that for some users, excessive use may indeed have very negative impacts on their lives.
I mean, would it be fair to say that sort of substantive use of social media can indeed sort of start to essentially rewire you neurologically?
Yes, absolutely. So what we know from the research that has been done is that there are a number of associations between the kinds of relationships you see in terms of behavior and brain mechanisms that are involved in engaging with, on the one hand, particular addictive substances, but on the other hand, also with potentially addictive behaviors, such as the engagement in social media, the engagement in online gaming. So we know that on a neuroimaging level, so on a neurochemical level, there are a number of similarities where the limbic brain areas are being activated during continued use of technology, during continued use of social media, as well as gaming, where there are reward systems integrated within those technological platforms, reward mechanisms that trigger the reward centers in the brain, similar to those reward centers that are being triggered through the ingestion of a psychoactive substance. So we know that research is supportive of this. At the same time, we know that the brain is an organ that learns really quickly. We can condition it to learn to associate rewards experienced through the engagement with social media with actual happy feelings. So over time, the brain learns to associate, your social media use with some sort of a reward, and therefore it will be requesting the reward on a regular basis. This is how potentially problematic behaviors may be maintained over time. And for some individuals, this may mean that they may actually require professional help in order to be able to get out of potential addictive cycles as well. And that's one of the reasons for why I think it's really important for the social media industry as well as the gaming industry to make sure that the corporate social responsibility measures are indeed increased. We have written recommendations to the UK Government Select Committee, Digital Sport and Media to really make suggestions in terms of what can be done to improve the situation. And we need additional regulatory mechanisms. And we also need the industry to work together with independent research organizations to ensure that we have the objective data stemming from within their services to give us a very clear indication about what is it about those platforms that may be problematic and how can we potentially change them in order to benefit the users in a positive way.
Dr. Kuss, absolutely fascinating stuff. Thank you for coming and giving a scientific perspective on this topic. We can speak now to Ian Corby, Executive Director at the Age Verification Providers Association, who joins me in the studio. Delighted to have you here, because something that has possessed me for a while now when it comes to social media and the World Wide Web in general is how vulnerable and exposed children are without proper protections. I mean, how much of a concern is this as we start looking at the online safety bill to make sure, not just in terms of the most hardcore content, such as adult material on porn sites, but even social media content? How do we protect youngsters?
Thanks very much for having me. There's a really famous cartoon showing two dogs playing on a laptop computer, and one looks to the other and says, "It's great. On the internet, nobody knows you're a dog." And the problem we have on the internet is nobody knows if you're a child. The internet was never designed for children. So in order to preserve the freedoms of adults, but be able to protect children, the first thing we've got to do is figure out which users are adults and which are children. And so what age verification has grown up to do, originally focused mostly on the adult content industry, as you mentioned, but now increasingly, because of new laws that are coming through on GDPR, the data protection laws, and obviously the online safety bill, which we were just giving evidence this morning in Parliament about, there's a growing need generally to know the age or broad age range of users online.
I mean, why on earth has this not happened already? Because certainly when I was growing up, pornography was on a magazine behind an opaque cover at the top shelf of a newsagent. You had to be an adult to buy it, even had to be an adult to reach it down from the top shelf, frankly. And yet today, material like that is available ubiquitously. And the age verifications they have in place, well, they're just rudimentary. Put in your birthday, anyone who can do a basic sum could invent something. Why on earth have we basically allowed this to run rampant and are now trying to claw it back in today?
I think it's properly a question for government, but I do believe in 5 years' time, say, we'll look back on the days when we had no general age checks online, in the same way as we'd be completely incredulous if now kids could walk into a casino or a strip joint without being challenged on their age. Because you mentioned the meta universe in your introduction. More and more of our life is going virtual and going online. And so all we are trying to do is make a very easy mechanism, a privacy-preserving mechanism, to allow us to apply those same norms that we've had for years in real society to our online lives.
And do we need to basically put these just on the most harmful content, or is this also about looking at social media? Because at one point Facebook were talking about bringing children's Instagram out. I mean, thankfully they seem to have ditched that prospect. Now they've been rather exposed as to realising their content can be extremely harmful to children. But I mean, would we need to put age verification on things such as Facebook and Instagram, which is supposed to remove harmful content anyway? Or is this just for those sites which are, you know, very obviously adult by nature?
Well, the new bill before Parliament looks at proportionate implementation, where you take a look at the risk and then you decide what level of age assurance you get. You can have very hard age assurance, check a passport, or softer age estimation, where we use sort of facial analysis to guess your age within perhaps 1 or 2 years of accuracy. So I think it's a matter of getting it proportionate, because, of course, the more rigorous it is, the more disruptive it is to your online behaviour. And of course, we want kids to use the internet because there's a world of opportunity out there. One thing the social media firms could do today is to start checking when you say you turn 18 because you opened your account 5 years ago when you were 13, they could check that you are actually 18 today by doing a proper adult age verification check. Unfortunately, that would probably demonstrate quite how many 10-year-olds are signing up to those social media platforms today.
When I've brought up conversations like this in the real world with other people and say, you know, I personally think that it's crazy that the World Wide Web is the wild, wild west, that anything can go on there and, you know, there's no checks, no regulation, and it might be a parallel world, but my word, it can be a dangerous one. People say, oh, well, you know, if you put things behind age verification, if you try and regulate porn, then people are just going to make it. It's going to go on the dark web. Children will get it anyway. How watertight is the sort of technology that you will be able to offer and hopefully that people will be able to implement to protect children? Is it sort of porous, or does it have a complete...
Well, as I say, it's proportionate. So it might be that to buy a knife online, you want to have an extremely strict measure, where even if you've proven your age last week, we'd still want to check your photo is the same photo as the ID we saw a week ago. But perhaps for accessing pornography, as long as you're roughly 18 or so, an estimation technique might be sufficient. So I think it's important to maintain that sense of proportionality when you apply this. And on that basis, it can be as strict as you want it to be. I would just think, for example, of my friend's daughter, my friend was telling me literally yesterday that she's got Net Nanny, she's got the stuff switched on for the ISP, she's tried everything possible, but her daughter has discovered search. And she searches for stuff and finds cartoons of stuff or things where bad words have been removed, so the search engine doesn't block those. And she's literally, the mum has had to go through and create a whole list of websites that she's blocking her 11-year-old daughter from accessing, but after the fact. So we need those platforms to be the ones taking responsibility to help mums and dads up and down the country by just checking that the children are old enough for the content that they're being shown.
And in creating this technology, have you found it really rather distressing or depressing to see the situation that we're in at the moment with the internet without any regulation?
Well, certainly I deal with the children's charities and they're extremely concerned about this. I think nobody's trying to take away the rights and freedoms of adults here. But if you take, for example, the advertising for high-fat, sugar and salt foods, the government said there can be no digital advertising because they don't trust the platforms to keep that advertising away from children. Now, if we had a more robust system where we could guarantee that audiences were adults and can make their own decisions about chocolate, then we wouldn't need these rather broad brush and draconian outright bans.
Ian, thank you so much for coming and talking about this today. It's fascinating stuff, a bit of a pet topic of mine, so I'm sure we'll be speaking.
Thank you for having me.
You've just heard from cybersecurity expert Philip Ingram, Ian Corby, Executive Director at the Age Verification Providers Association, and Dr. Daria Kuss, Associate Professor of Psychology at Nottingham Trent University. Now, after the break, I'm continuing this conversation with Andy Burrows, Head of Child Safety Online at the NSPCC, Alex Kadia, Managing Director UK of NewsGuard, and Imran Ahmed, CEO of Countering Digital Hate. See you in a couple of minutes.
Join me, Nana Akweer, on Fridays, Saturdays and Sunday afternoons here on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as my panel and I take on some of the top stories hitting the headlines.
You can look up the statistics.
No, you look it up. I hug everyone. We learn from it and try and move on. That's it. Opinion is at the heart of the show. It's a place for open and frank conversation, but without the fear of cancellation. So join me here on GB News on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons between 4 and 6 p.m.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
How long before we start getting adverts for bespoke social media therapy, counselling for our online addictions and habits, therapy for digital disorders? We all know someone who has taken a break from Twitter, closed down their Facebook, or desperately attempted to cache the contents of a decade-old timeline waiting to be scraped by a defence architect to unearth a career-destroying post. We know people receive death threats and a relentless barrage of abuse from online trolls. We know influencers marketing themselves as plastic commodities for clicks devoid of the complexities of human nuance. We know of conspiracy theories, deep fakes, paedophile rings, financial frauds, cyber espionage, terrorist networks, uprising from the Arab Spring to the End SARS campaigns, violent pornography, child grooming, the dark web, data theft, and an industrial scale of intelligence gathering and mental manipulation way beyond the wildest dreams and material bounds of the non-virtual world. And yet, we have allowed a technology barely 15 years old, to not only grow at a rapid rate, but to entirely self-regulate, to the point that dot-com deities may deign to strip an elected president of a platform while covering up their own seedy internal reports of the horrific and insidious lifelong harms they elicit, particularly towards children. Were we crazy to allow Silicon Valley to take over the world, albeit a virtual one? Is it time to delete the myriad apps that cajole and control you through your laptop, tablet and phone? Or are you grounded and robust enough to weather the social media storm, whatever it may have in store? Is our boundless online metaverse an exciting and truly liberating testament to human progress? Or is it the sinister beginning of an unprecedented dystopian decline? Well, my first guest this hour is Head of Child Safety Online Policy for the NSPCC, Andy Burrows. Andy, always great to have you on. I mean, the online safety bill, the Parliament's taking evidence right now for that. Do you think that we stand some chance of protecting the innocence of children against the altar of adult rights and freedoms?
We absolutely can. And for a long time, Alex, you know, we've heard the tech companies say that these issues are too big, they're too complex, they aren't issues that nation states can legislate on. And, you know, those arguments are just palpably nonsense because the UK is one of the biggest markets in the world for all of these companies. So if we have the political will to say enough is enough in every other aspect of children's lives, governments set the rules about how children should be protected. And if we want to do the same online, then we can. So we've got this bill that's currently going through the early foothills of parliamentary scrutiny. And if there's the political will to really bolster that, to really make sure that child safety is front of mind for tech firms, not just an afterthought, then absolutely we can see the UK really lead the world, really demonstrate global leadership when it comes to protecting our kids from the range of really, you know, disturbing harms that we see at NSPCC every single day.
Well, let's talk about some of those disturbing harms. It may only be 5 o'clock in the afternoon, so we'll have to pick how we talk about them quite gently. But do you think that a lot of adults don't really realise the extent of risk and quite how revolting and nefarious some of these activities are?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And what we've seen is child sexual abuse in particular soar in the last few years. We've seen it increase in scale and complexity. And let's not be fatalistic about this. This isn't abuse happening to children that, if the internet wasn't happening, might be happening in other ways. What we're seeing is that sites like Facebook, like Instagram, like Snapchat have been designed in a way where child safety has not been considered. So these platforms give abusers new opportunities to contact large numbers of children, to groom large numbers of children in ways that simply weren't possible. They're actively exploiting the very poor, the very high-risk design features of sites to be able to commit, very, very horrific abuse. And very often what we're talking about here is not contacting children with a view of then going on to necessarily meet them in person, but it's using social networks to contact children with a view of then getting children to produce images and videos of themselves. And in a sense, social networks are being used as a conveyor belt for a constant supply of new child abuse images that start on Facebook, that start on Instagram, but then will eventually find their way onto the dark web. This is exactly the type of thing that we can and should prevent. It's really disappointing that it's taken as long as it has to get to the point where we recognise that self-regulation just doesn't work, but now we really can fix it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm speaking to Ian Corby, who's been giving evidence to the Parliamentary Select Committee today, saying that, he hopes that with age verification, we're going to live in an era soon enough where we'll look back on the way things are today with disgust. We've spoken there about adults exploiting children online, abusing children online. But is there not a risk as well that the way that we're allowing children to operate in what is actually a sort of very unbounded, unregulated adult world risks turning children themselves into abusers largely of other children?
Yeah, there are, kind of real problems with peer-on-peer abuse, and we've seen with Everyone's Invited over recent months the way in which harm can be committed by teenagers as well as to teenagers. But I think there's a really important point here, and this comes back to the principle of, are we making sure that sites are safe for all users who are using them, and that includes children. And one of the things that really frustrates me very often, particularly on conversations about how do we balance privacy for adults and freedom of expression for adults with those of children, is that we shouldn't forget that here in the UK, 1 in 5 internet users here in the UK, 1 in 3 globally, are children. So in simple democratic terms, when tech companies are making products, when we're designing laws about online safety, we should be starting from the point that we're talking about a really significant group of users. And not only are we talking about a significant group of users, 1 in 5 here in the UK, but also users that are inherently vulnerable because they are children and they face additional risks and vulnerabilities as a result of that. Very often that gets lost in the debate. So, when we're talking about, for example, suicide and self-harm content, sometimes this becomes quite a philosophical debate about freedom of expression and privacy versus safety. Let's be really clear about some of the types of content that in my job I see every day. That is, kind of twisted influencer style accounts on Instagram that are then, teaching young people, in a kind of twisted influencer guise, how to go on and commit, really dangerous acts of suicide and self-harm. The algorithms kick in, and then that means that a vulnerable teenager who perhaps sees that content once or twice when they're feeling low, then get bombarded with that on the algorithms. And, if anyone wants to say to me that is, someone's freedom of expression to post that content, it's nonsense. We're talking about harmful content to teenagers that shouldn't be there. And then not only do the platforms fail to enforce their own terms and conditions, their own community standards, it's then their processes, their algorithms that are kicking in and causing further harm. And, it's really vital that we see this debate, in the terms really of what it is.
Yeah, Andy Burrows, and it's really vital that you keep on doing what you're doing. It's always a pleasure to talk to you and raising this deeply complex subject. Delight to have you on the programme again. Well, joining me in the studio now is Managing Director of UK's NewsGuard, Alex Cadier. Great to have you here. Now, you look more at things such as fake news and deep fakes and the creation of posts and content that really don't necessarily tether to reality and may actually indeed be designed to manipulate us into certain courses of action that, well, frankly, they're not necessarily societally beneficial.
Yeah, I mean, NewsGuard fights misinformation at a source level. So we create ratings based on 9 transparent journalistic criteria, which are on our website, and we give a rating out of 100 of news and information websites. Certainly websites who claim to be news and information websites. That's a big part of the problem when it comes to misinformation, is that you have known outlets, but then, for example, we're in Paddington in central London. I go online and I see Paddington News and I go, great, I'm going to have information about Paddington. No, it turns out it's run by a local shop who's trying to do down the next shop. And there's no way at the moment on social media to distinguish from that. Solutions like NewsGuard, for example, could give users information on ownership and financing, who runs the outlet, things that are transparent in most major media outlets. But a lot of online, anonymous, smaller blogs, which have huge followings on social media, spread this misinformation with no real resilience, like you were talking in your introduction for users. There's no real way of knowing, right? They look legit, they seem fine, they're publishing what they call news. How are we really to know what's misinformation, what's not, and what we can rely on? And I think the platforms are certainly not particularly engaging with that kind of content.
Yeah, I mean, we at GB News like to think of ourselves as a multi-platform news entity, but we have there our television channel to make sure that we are regulated. We're regulated by Ofcom, which means when it comes to news, we have to operate under strict conditions where we can't give you a deluge of fake content. We have to be very careful with things such as accuracy. Do you think the risk now there's so much more citizen journalism and user-generated content and people wanting to become, let's say, YouTube influencers, that they need to go that extra step further to break through the static and to grab attention, and as a result, actually, the content people imbibe online, the clickbait, is likely to get ever more detached from reality?
Sure, and I think that has a lot to do with how algorithms promote things, and that's one of the big things that the Online Safety Bill is looking at. It's not necessarily the content, right? The government isn't going to come and say, well, you posted this fake thing, you're under arrest, we're going to take you to the shop. No, it's how these things are amplified. How are Facebook and YouTube and other platforms deciding to amplify things? And if they decide to take something down, why? What are the reasons? Why are you taking down one piece of content and not another? Why is it that anti-vaccine content can be allowed on one platform, but a member of parliament making an argument that you can disagree with is removed on another? The Online Safety Bill brings consistency to these things and also brings a right of appeal and transparency. If you take my post down, you have to explain to me at least why you've done it. That's very much the bare minimum, as you would with anything that's regulated by Ofcom, like GB News, like other outlets. And I think there's a real important distinction there that might actually empower users a lot more rather than quash, or that feeling, that frustration of, a friend of mine had his Instagram account deleted, couldn't for love nor money get an explanation as to why, and then it came back one day. No reason why.
It's fair to say, isn't it, we've got elected leaders in the real world, most of them democratically put in position, but our virtual world is governed by a load of sandal-wearing hippies in Silicon Valley that we don't really know much about.
Well, I don't know about their footwear. I couldn't possibly comment on their footwear.
But was that some fake news just
I
there?
wouldn't. Well, I don't know. I'll check on the sandals and get back to you, Alex. No, I think you're right in that there just needs to be structures in place about the systems and the processes and why we are being fed information the way we are. So, for example, you will have a smartphone there, and you'll have a social media app. What you see on your feed is unique. You have it alone. I have my own experience. Your producers in the gallery have their own experience. We have no way of knowing why we get fed what we get fed. There's no transparency about that. Where with everything else, there's some level of regulation. I think the Online Safety Bill will do a lot on forcing platforms to explain themselves and explain why, if you like a certain page on a certain platform, you'll be suggested another page that's exactly the same, to encourage you to stay there and stay there and stay there, with no distinction as to whether or not that's health misinformation or very cute puppies. If it's very cute puppies, great, we're all doing fine. But there is very dangerous health misinformation that thrives on these platforms still, and no transparency as to why it's left on or what the systems in place are there to deal with it.
Alex, thank you so much for coming into the studio to talk to me today. Fascinating stuff. Well, let's head to Washington, D.C. and speak to a friend of the show, the CEO of the Centre of Countering Digital Hate, Imran Ahmed. So I gobbled your name up a bit there, Imran. Lovely to have you back on. It seems to be in the UK, the Parliament is taking evidence right now, looking into all of the risks and the pitfalls of a completely unregulated online world. But when it comes to things such as online hate, how easy is that going to be to regulate? It's one thing to put age verification in place, but it's quite another to try and control people's behaviours, which are often so different from their real-life behaviours when they want to behave like online trolls. How on earth do you put that back in the box?
Well, look, norms of behaviour, so what people feel is acceptable, is defined by how a community operates and whether or not there are sanctions, for example, for bad behaviour. Let's take, for example, in the real world, if you were to go up to a footballer and call him the N-word, there'd be repercussions for it. You might lose friends. You might be, if you were in the stadium, you might be banned from the stadium. You might be arrested for it. It might be considered assault. Whereas online, what we find is that the worst kinds of behavior, in fact, are rewarded by the algorithms that underpin these platforms, that decide what content to promote. And we see that they actually reward the worst behavior. So they actually elevate anger, misinformation, which generates controversy over tolerance, good information. And that's one of the things that's been coming out from, viewers may have heard of Frances Haugen, the whistleblower from Facebook, who revealed their internal documents. This is what their own researchers had found. And they realized it was a serious problem. And you know what they did about it? They covered it up. In fact, when organizations like the Center for Countering Digital Hate did independent research to find these things to be true, they called us liars.
Wow, strident stuff. When we're talking about the manipulation of the algorithms, creating sort of high concentrated extreme content and pushing that stuff over and above what some people might find to be quite benign and benevolent content, how much of that is actually being executed by the creation of bots and therefore sort of being used and manipulated to sow discord and division in society by, potentially hostile foreign actors?
We've certainly found the Russian state, for example, to be highly active in trying to promote divisive content over content that represents, most of us in our normal selves, which is that for the main part, we're a cohesive society, which is based on science, based on facts. We have agreed, we say that things happen. Boris Johnson is the Prime Minister. He isn't a space lizard. There are things we can agree on, but of course, what we find is that both the activities of bad actors who seek to elevate contentious information, but also the activities of the platforms themselves who elevate the controversial over the normal, over what we can all accept. Because for them, it's not about trying to make the world a worse place. It's not their aim. I'm not saying Mark Zuckerberg is a Bond villain. But what I am saying is that he's very greedy. And for them, they know that they're in the attention game. Look, 98% of the revenues of Facebook, for example, which also owns Instagram and WhatsApp, that they come from advertising. So this is an attention business. They need to keep us scrolling, engaged, talking to each other, arguing with each other, because arguing is much more sort of addictive than just having a chit chat. And so what they know is that if they elevate the bad information, they elevate controversial information, they can keep us on the platform, they can keep serving us ads, they can keep making money from it. Now, normally when you have a problem like that, an industry that has a lot of good to it, look, social media connects us, that's an amazing thing, but it also has harms, well, then you create costs for those harms to disincentivize their production, to make them do things to clean it up. That's how regulation works. How on earth can it be that the last time that we regulated these companies was decades ago, before social media even was invented? So the online safety bill, I'm very excited about it, but gosh, it's taken a long time to come into fruition, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's going to be a big job, isn't it, Imran? And we're definitely going to talk to you for your review when we get more detail on it. Thank you so much for coming on the programme again. We always love to hear from you. Imran Ahmed there from the Centre of Countering Digital Hate, talking about an extremely important topic, which is, of course, online safety. And we're asking you, do you think social media harms you? Well, lots of you have been getting in touch. Ian says it only harms you if you think the world revolves around it. Most of the content will either be a positive view of one's life or vile comments directed at you or others. Treat social media as a bit of fun and nothing else. Otherwise, you'll likely be disappointed with what it gives. Good advice there. Tony says, no, just use that easy tool they give you, the block button. Tommy says there are benefits to social media, but it can also be harmful and detrimental. It depends on how you use it and other factors too. Thomas says too many people think social media represents the real world. It doesn't. It's mostly an echo chamber. Unfortunately, MPs seem to think Twitter represents the Gen Pop as well. Gen Pop, I assume he means general population. There was no doubt being banged by character limitations of that pesky social media we're talking about. Loz says you have to have to stay out from media because it's poison, especially for young kids. Kids should be banned from it. Well, I kind of agree with that, to be honest, but I'm pretty draconian. You've just heard from Andy Burrows, Head of Child Safety online at the NSPCC, Alex Kadia, Managing Director UK of NewsGuard, and Imran Ahmed, CEO of Countering Digital Hate. After the break, I'm continuing this conversation with you. I'll have your views on the issue of online safety.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Spoken to a wide range of guests on our main topic, which is talking about online safety. Cybersecurity expert Philip Ingram spoke about the hidden meaning in adverts.
All of that doesn't happen by accident. It's being designed, and you came up with some of the phraseology that there is behind it, but the wider psychodemographic profiling that these platforms can do to really understand what someone's psyche is, can then very subtly be used to change people's beliefs, to change people's thinkings, and get them to do things that maybe if they were rational and not being influenced, they wouldn't do.
Well, Associate Professor and Cyber Psychology expert at Nottingham Trent University, Dr. Daria Kuss, says social media does have a big impact on our mental health.
We are on social media on a regular basis. We're using technology in order to communicate, in order to engage with others, in order to do our shopping, to be entertained. We're using social media for any kinds of purposes. Technology use really has become the status quo. And I think we really need to understand that it has become so deeply intertwined with our lives that we cannot imagine our lives without technology. And as a consequence, what we will see and what we are already seeing are a number of psychological impacts of technology use on our mental health and well-being.
Executive Director for the Age Verification Providers Association, Ian Corby, says we need to know the age of users of the internet.
The internet was never designed for children. So in order to preserve the freedoms of adults, but be able to protect children, the first thing we've got to do is figure out which users are adults and which are children. And so what age verification has grown up to do, originally focused mostly on the adult content industry, as you mentioned, but now increasingly, because of new laws that are coming through on GDPR, the data protection laws, and obviously the online safety bill, which we were just giving evidence this morning in Parliament about, there's a growing need generally to know the age or broad age range of users online.
Well, now it's time to hear what you, the viewers, have to say on online safety as we give you the final word. Do you think social media harms you? Joseph says unequivocally yes, particularly for young adults. Social media has become a platform for false success and happiness, which has had an untold negative impact on mental health. Mark says social media is the scourge of modern life. God, sound like people after my own heart here. It will eventually destroy civilization. Attaboy, that's the one. Ian says it harms everyone, but go for your interests that are and not negative topics. Don't let it control you. Chris says, it doesn't harm me. I don't care about social media. The people on here aren't my friends. My friends are down the pub. Good, go have a pint with them. Owen says, if it harms you, there is a solution. Put your device down, go outside and enjoy the nature on your doorstep. Couldn't agree more. Calvin says, no, not for me. I'm not a massive social media fan. I do, however, find it amusing reading the utter rubbish that the majority believe in. Well, thank you for all of your views. And finally, we put a poll up on Twitter where we asked, do you think online safety harms you? 76% of you said yes and 33% said no. So there you are. A whole 2/3 of you think that your social media activity is doing you some harm. So maybe listen to what some of the other viewers recommended. Turn the phone off, maybe delete an app or two. You might find it a liberating experience. I know that I did. I'm Alex Phillips, and you've been watching We Need to Talk About. And for the last hour, we've been talking about your online safety. That's it for today. I'm going to see you next time.
I'm Neil Oliver. You can join me live every Saturday evening for opinions and discussions about the week's top stories. There's also a smattering of history and archaeology and features that define our great British Isles. You'll hear my thoughts unfiltered, as well as those of my guests, and we don't always agree. And we want to hear from you too. Neil Oliver Live, Saturdays from 7 on GB News.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the political correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Audio circuit.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Ahead to this evening's weather across the UK, turning colder as a weak weather front moves south across the country. Let's take a look at the details. The southwest of England will tend to remain cloudy this evening, with a few spots of rain moving in from the north. Mild initially, but turning much colder later on. Southeast England and the London area will also be on the cloudy side. Initially dry, but outbreaks of rain will arrive from the north. The rainy conditions will be across Wales this evening, a few heavy bursts developing as it sinks southwards. Temperatures around 10 degrees Celsius, though, this evening. It will also be cloudy and damp across the Midlands, with splashes of rain moving southwards. Temperatures around 9 or 10 degrees Celsius, but falling later as clearer air moves in from the north. Clear skies for northern England this evening once the rain has cleared, with a brisk northerly wind developing. Most places will become dry, but feeling much colder as temperatures continue to fall. Heavy showers across much of Scotland, these falling as snow over the tops of the mountains. A strong and gusty northerly wind too. The clearest weather will be towards the southeast. Showers also expected across Northern Ireland. Some could be heavy, with some hail too. Feeling much colder, with temperatures in single figures and a brisk northerly wind around the coasts.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.